Hello everyone, it's Melissa from the Ranting Shop, and I know I've been missing in action. I'm okay, it's just that everything has been very overwhelming and I've been focused on other things. But I'm back here to review the remaining episodes of Ready to Love, starting from episode 8, where the women had to bring in their exes to meet their current love interest, and basically the situation with Morgan was a mess because her putting Nay in her allegedly superficial relationships here is crazy, because if it wasn't that serious, then you shouldn't have went to that extent. And then she explains to Tommy that his hair was his pride and joy, so you purposely went out to harm him for what you describe as a superficial relationship. That's just crazy to me, and I feel like Tony called her out on it, because if you're going to go to that full extent, it cannot be superficial. Like, if you're gonna do this for what you consider a superficial relationship, I don't want to know what you do for a serious relationship. That is a big red flag. And then we had the situation with Jeffrey, who felt as if she had no appropriate partner for her future partners to see, which is a huge red flag, because you can't tell me you have absolutely no one that you could at least use or substitute that can allow the men to know more about you. That's just crazy to me. And to me, it seems as if it's a move to make her come across to hide things from the men, in my opinion. Now, moving on to the situation with Cynthia. Now, that is Cynthia's baby's father. That is probably one of the closest connections we've ever seen come onto this show to speak on, the ex. And he was very difficult with the men, and to me, I understand that that is the father of her children, and he needs to know that the person he's entrusting to be around his children has Cynthia's best interest at heart. So although it was a bit tough, I understand where he was coming from. Andre is not ready for pressure. I feel like when he is put in situations that he doesn't quite like, you really start seeing his true intentions and the type of person he really is. We saw him with Mercedes. We saw how he was acting and pushing Mercedes for answers when she wasn't ready to give it to him. We saw when Cynthia's ex was pushing him, he didn't like that. And it does appear that it was too much pressure for him and he got up and leave. But I felt as if he just doesn't like being questioned. He doesn't like being, denied. That's what it seems like to me. However, Anthony held his own. He was able to do really well for all or most of the dates he was put on, because I feel like he's genuinely intentional about what he wants for his future, and the exes was able to receive that from him, and the other men, not quite so. Either that or they just cannot handle criticism. Now, as for the deliberations, it's looking as if they're basically standing firm on these three guys that they're not quite dealing or meshing with. We have Blue, that I feel like a lot of women kept there because they felt sorry for him. I think that's what it was. Because essentially, Blue has not shown any form of intentionality when it comes to these women. We don't even know who he's interested in. And it is at that point, it was the 8th episode. So if by that time you aren't able to give a clear indication of who you're interested in, then you're playing games, in my opinion. And Jeffrey, she doesn't want to say Blue because she feels sorry for Blue. But I mean, it is what it is. He's not intentional. And then we had Marcia, who was just, Blue was her top for a long time, and then the date made her realize that he's not so sure about her. And I feel like at that point, you should be sure. So, in my opinion, I think he left for that particular episode. The women mentioned Blake. Morgan doesn't like Blake. Not much of the women really like Blake. And the reasons for Morgan saying she doesn't like Blake is like, it sounds like it's not substantial enough for you to make that conclusion about him. But I mean, if she feels so strongly about not liking him for whatever vibe she got off of him, then I guess she's valid in her opinions. So Blue was indeed sent home, and but what I'm gathering from other people is, although Anthony was successful at convincing the men that they were the right choice for the women, a lot of women viewers feel as if Anthony may not be as masculine as he's putting off. And also Jeffrey, they don't really know about Jeffrey because they feel like she's being mysterious and she's keeping a lot of information about her true authentic self behind closed doors, which scares people, I think. But anyways, let's go right back into the other episode 9. Wife Me Please. Alright, so episode 9, the men had the task of introducing their women to their best friends, their truth tellers, as Tommy likes to say. And what I gathered from it is that in the date with, I believe, Andre, I think that was the first date, the guy gravitated more towards Cynthia. And what I've realized with Andre that makes me feel like he's not gonna end up choosing Cynthia in the end is that I feel like he feels like there's this undercover strong woman in Cynthia that I feel like he doesn't want to deal with if ever it pops up. So I feel like that is the little bit of caution that he has when it comes to Cynthia. But Jeffrey, she makes herself seem very soft-spoken, feminine, not combative. And I think that's the one you'd quicker go to because she doesn't scare him in regards to she would not hurt his ego. She's not gonna hurt his masculinity, but Cynthia might. And that's literally all it is between the two of them. And that's why when the friend is like, Cynthia, he's like, that's not where he wants to go. He wants to go with Jeffrey. But anyways, moving on from that, we had the date with Tony. Tony introduced his friend to Marcia and Cynthia, and we all know that he has a stronger connection with Morgan. But the friend told him that Marcia would have been a better fit. But we all know where he'd go. He's not gonna go towards Marcia. Then we have Mark Anthony, who introduced his friend to Mercedes and Jeffrey. And anybody looking on the outside would say you will probably have an easier life if you take Mercedes. She doesn't have kids, just like you don't have kids. She's the type of girl you're used to dating, so there's like, I guess, nothing that's gonna really surprise you about the relationship. But then again, this is a type of show that makes you do things you don't typically do. So I don't think he wants to do what he typically does. And in that sense, I feel like he's going more towards Jeffrey. Jeffrey with Crohn's disease and Jeffrey with children from previous relationships whose dads he wasn't introduced to. You'll probably never be introduced to the dads. So I don't know. There's a lot of mystery around Jeffrey that is scary, and she's coming with a lot. And yes, it sounds good to say, oh, you're looking at just her, you're looking to see if you could mesh with her, and then you consider what comes with her, as in her kids and her illness. That is fine. But then again, it's like, are you just saying things for the camera, or is that truly what you want? Because honestly speaking, I feel like neither of them are his for sure pick. If he does go with Jeffrey, it's not gonna last. If he does go with Mercedes, maybe it might last, but then again, because that's not truly who he wants, it may not. So we have that. And then we have Anthony, who brought Sue-Ann, Mercedes, and Cynthia. It's quite clear to me, first off, Mercedes is not that into Anthony. Yes, he's her number two, meaning if she didn't get through with Mac Anthony, she would go to Anthony. But Anthony's not really someone she'd go for, because she keeps talking about the negative aspect of getting with him. Like, if you really want somebody, you wouldn't speak of the difficulties you'd have to encounter if you choose to be with them. You'd speak about only the positives. So that just proves to me that she's not that interested in Anthony, because she's always making excuses. As far as Sue-Ann is not that into Anthony. We see her connection with Blake. Well, we don't see her connection with Blake. She's the only one that sees her connection with Blake, but we see where she's leaning towards, and it's not Anthony. So really and truly, his strongest connection is Cynthia. Now, with Cynthia, I'm not sure where she wants to go. I'm not sure if she wants to go with Andre or if she wants to go with Anthony. Personally, I feel like she should go ahead and go with Anthony, because Andre has hesitations about her, and I feel like he makes it seem like it's small hesitations, but it's big hesitations. For some reason, he doesn't quite trust Cynthia. And actually, the funny thing about it is, Cynthia has come across the most authentic out of everybody on the show. So the fact that he doesn't trust her, I don't know if it's because he has this mental block, or not mental block, but he has this reservation about her that she's gonna be combative and she's gonna be aggressive and she's gonna be this strong black woman that's gonna question his authority and all that. So I think that's what his hesitation with Cynthia. And I feel like it's bigger than he makes it seem that it is, and as a result, he's not going to go with her. So I think at this stage it's clear to see. Oh yes, before we even move on to my prediction, we have this guy, what's his name? London, who had his friend meet Morgan, his only connection, and he brought up the neck situation, and to anybody it's gonna be a big red flag, because if you saying, as I said many times, the relationship was not that big of a deal, why did you feel the need to make a grand and not a grand entrance, but why did your leaving have to be why did you have to do something so big if you were gonna leave anyway? And she makes it like a joke, but it's actually quite serious and something he should really take into consideration. Now, as far as deliberations were concerned, essentially Marcia got sent home. However, I noticed that most of the men mentioned Sue-Ann in their bottoms. So that's crazy to me that they sent Marcia home when Sue-Ann was the one that people connect the least with. So that's just to show you the show chooses to do things to follow its own narrative. It doesn't necessarily go with what the people want, but more so what is best for the story of the entire show. So anyways, let me know what you guys think. Did you guys agree with Marcia being sent home, or did you think Sue-Ann should have been sent home instead? Because really and truly, she only had one connection and she only chooses to connect with one person. So we're gonna move into episode 10. Okay, so for this particular episode, it was a lot of emotions. The guys moved to the house. Every season the contestants move into a shared house, and it looked like it was in the bayou, because the way Tommy pulled up in that situation, it proves they were in the back country. But anyways, it was a very explosive episode. The takeaways from this episode is that it appears to me that Andre is feeling Jeffrey more. According to Mark Anthony, he says he's moving more towards Mercedes. He spent more time with Mercedes, and that is true, because I barely saw him and his interactions with Jeffrey. As far as Morgan is concerned, she had two men in the house. She has hothead Tony, and she has Lyndon, that is apparently a leech. So what they were trying to highlight with Lyndon is that everywhere Morgan goes, he's there. And to me, all that does is prove that he does have a connection with Morgan and he wants to be around her. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. You want to be around people you like. That's a given. But it annoyed Tony because it's like, I can never just be there with Morgan. Lyndon is always just the hair behind. And as much as he wants to get frustrated, I feel like it's also unreasonable of him to expect Morgan to just completely block off her other connection for him. I understand that he doesn't have any options, and in a sense he's in the kind of weaker position in this stance, and Morgan has the upper hand, and I feel like he doesn't like that. His masculinity doesn't like that. His ego doesn't like that. He's not in full control, because Morgan has not completely told Lyndon it's Tony. It's simply Tony. It's 100% Tony. And they were like getting to know each other and everything like that. Mercedes going more into Marc Anthony, which makes sense. We have Anthony getting clarity from Sue Ann that, you know, she's more into Blake. She's making it seem as if it could have been Anthony if he was opening up to her, when I just feel like that's BS. She was always gonna pick Blake because she's blinded by the way Blake looks. Blake has absolutely no personality, so I really don't know what she's connecting to with Blake, but we all know Blake was the option she was gonna go for regardless. And then we have Cynthia. She only now that Andre came back, I'm realizing that him and Cynthia's relationship may not even be that strong. And I think it's because Cynthia mentioned not opening up to him the way she's opened up to Anthony. And I feel like she has the safeguard that she has with Andre is justified, because something about Andre is just giving me red flags. The way he's so, I don't know, like it just appears to me that when Andre doesn't get what he wants, so I don't know, he's not as bubbly and nicey as he makes himself seem. So that reservation that Cynthia has with him just speaks to the fact that she doesn't completely trust him, just like he doesn't completely trust her for some reason. All right, and then we have so Anthony really only has Mercedes and Cynthia, and I think he put Cynthia at the top. And rightfully so, because Mercedes has a lot of reservations about him because she feels like she's not ready for the life he wants. So Tony and Lyndon, everybody's sitting down, everybody's eating. There was this swinging match between Tony and Lyndon when it comes to Morgan. They first had that situation playing pool. He ended up winning. And so I guess he won sleeping next to her. Tony stated it like, you're winning, who's gonna sleep next to her tonight, versus Lyndon, who was like, we're gonna see who wins her honor, you know. So just the way they phrase things, it speaks to the way they view the woman. I feel like Lyndon has a bit more respect for Morgan than Tony does. I feel like Tony sees Morgan as his possession, as somebody he owns. And I think in this particular episode, she saw that too, and she didn't like that, because towards the ending of the episode, when they were eating, Tony's like, oh, for some reason, because he says he doesn't feel threatened by Lyndon, but he clearly does. And he's annoyed with Morgan because she's not putting her foot down and saying, oh, she's essentially not cutting off Lyndon, so that's pissing him off. But essentially, we come to find out that he told Lyndon that if Marcia was there, that he could have Morgan. And yes, that sounds crazy, and it kind of proves the point that he does see Morgan as this object for his possession, and she didn't like that feeling, so she went off. She was upset. Lyndon comes to her first and apologizes to her and stuff like that. Lyndon so far throughout this entire episode has been a very, very good sport. He's extremely laid back. Even if he's rejected, he takes it in stride. He laughs, he smiles. It doesn't bother him. But with Tony, he gets angry about it, and he reacts in a very aggressive manner, and that may not play out very well for him in relationships or in the future. And so later on, he goes to speak with Morgan, and he's explaining to Morgan why, he is, or he felt how he felt and how he did what he did. But the difference between the way Lyndon communicates and the way Tony communicates, you could see that Tony, I guess he's this macho guy that just doesn't know how to genuinely apologize for his mistakes, and that might very well end up getting him sent home, because your unwillingness to just apologize and let that go is crazy to me. And the way he was trying to make it Morgan's fault is a huge problem. Own up to your stuff. You're the one that open up this conversation and end up getting yourself sold out because you wanted to be the bigger man in the situation. So anyways, next episode we see that Morgan and Lyndon end up sharing a kiss. I feel like Tony is upset about it. I don't know what he's gonna do. We'll see. And we have, for elimination, Sue-Ann and I think Mercedes were put on the block. Now, I'm not sure who's going to be sent home. I don't know if it's Sue-Ann. I don't know if it's Mercedes. I want it to be Sue-Ann, but I feel like it's gonna be Mercedes for some reason. It could go either way. The men kind of had them half as far as who they were feeling and who they were not feeling. But at least with Mercedes, she's friendly with the other guys. But with Sue-Ann, I feel like she's made it pretty clear that her number one connection is Blake. So her cutting off these other connections, to me, should make her the one to go home, because she has less even friendship connections with the other people. But we'll see later how that goes. I'm gonna go lastly into episode 11 that was played most recently. Let's get into it. P.S. Every time I see Jeffrey and Andre kissing, I cannot watch it. It makes me cringe for some reason. And every time Jeffrey has to explain her connection with Andre or with any guy, she makes it seem so poetic. Oh, we melt into each other. I don't know. So it makes me feel like I don't quite know what Jeffrey wants and who she really is, because she's very poetic about all the connections she's having. I don't know if she's lived in fairy tales for most of her life and that's why her relationships don't work, but just cringe. So we were left off a cliffhanger, so we don't know who's going on. We don't know if it's Sue-Ann. We don't know if it's Morgan. We don't know if it's Mercedes, sorry. So we find out that Sue-Ann, to my shock and surprise, is the one being sent home. But what I will say is that the men have been quite consistent with their criticism of Sue-Ann, in that they kept saying that she was closed off. And I truly believe she was. I feel like when she found her match in Blake, she kind of shut down any other connections. Anthony was her other connection, and she made it very known that he snoozed and he lost her. And so her attention was fully on Blake. And I don't blame the men for putting her in their bottoms, because there was just simply no connection there with her. The only person that had another connection with her was Anthony. And since she decided to cut that off, she literally had no lifeline. Now, one thing with this show is that as much as, yes, you found your connection, you must still play the game strategically. You must still make sure you have a second and a third person you could always, go to, and you can always rely on if your main connection doesn't work out. And unluckily for Sue-Ann, she didn't play much of a game, and I feel like that was to her detriment, and now she was being sent home. Anyways, let's go back. So with Sue-Ann leaving, it's safe to say that Blake is going to follow. So we see that Cynthia and Anthony shared a kiss, even though they said to each other that they were not gonna kiss unless they knew for sure it was just them two. But I guess the way it happened was just nobody could have really cautioned themselves. But it's cute, and I really hope they choose each other in the end. But of course, she has another connection with Andre, and the way she speaks about it, she describes a connection with Andre as this unspoken connection and stuff like that. So I don't know who she's feeling more, but what I will say is, if Andre had to choose between himself and her and Jeffrey, I feel like he would go for Jeffrey instead. If you really see how they connect and what they do when they're with each other, the kissing with Jeffrey and all that, I just feel like he's gonna pick Jeffrey over Cynthia. So I want her to choose Anthony over Andre. But so let's go into the whole situation with Tony and Lyndon and Morgan. So Lyndon decided he's gonna go to the side with Morgan, speak to her about where she feels like she is in the journey and who she's leaning more towards. Is he wasting his time, or so on and so forth? Morgan knows fully well that although she does like Lyndon, she's been using him this entire time to get under Tony's skin. Whether she likes to admit it or not, it is what it is. I know it's not something nice to want to verbalize and actually say to somebody, but I think in this process it's best to be honest. And even he knows, because basically he asked him, okay, so who are you choosing, who are you? And her answer is, oh, I haven't chosen anybody, I haven't done this yet, I haven't done that yet. But what she says kind of contradicts that statement when she says that, okay, she's gonna see what Tony does, she's gonna give him a chance to fix his mess. You giving another guy a chance to fix his mess just proves that you're waiting for him to act right so you can not feel guilty by choosing him. That is what that is. And he picked up on that, and he's like, he's not buying the fact that she hasn't chosen somebody, because she has. And her statement, if it wasn't clear enough, really solidified that statement, because it's like, if you're gonna be waiting for him to act right, it proves that you have a stronger connection with him and you want him to just behave. Lyndon hasn't given her any reason to question him. Lyndon hasn't given her any reason to be worried about him. But we know that that little bit of toxicity that Tony has is what has her feeling for him, and I feel like it's gonna get really explosive. So after the talk with Lyndon, she's realizing that, okay, it is pathetic because I know Tony is not the one for me, but I still want him, and she's crying, wanting to make candles, but crying and stuff like that. And she's speaking with Cynthia about the situation, and then somebody gives Tony the heads up that she was crying. He comes in trying to figure out what's wrong with her, and her response was very aggressive, and I feel like it was unnecessarily aggressive. Like, there was no need for her to make it so like rude. Like, I think he was genuinely wanting to know what was wrong with her, but I feel like she doesn't want him to know that she's crying over Lyndon in a sense. So he kind of picked it up, and he's like, if she's spending 2 hours crying over another dude, then I don't know, but then Andre is telling him, well, maybe she's feeling bad. I mean, you never know, and it's never good to make assumptions. That's why it's always good to talk to people directly. You may have your suspicions, you may feel how you feel, but if you've never spoken with the person to find out what's really going on, then it's like your assumptions literally make no sense at all. So the people are like disseminating the candles that they made and so on. And what really struck me is that Jeffrey gave Andre a candle, but she didn't give one to Mark Anthony. And Mark Anthony gave his candle to Mercedes. He didn't give one to Jeffrey. Now, Mark Anthony never went about and said, oh, because she's going to pay her attention to Andre, I'm going to pay attention to Mercedes. But she saw it as, oh, I saw like a bit of his ego. So why is it that when you clearly feel a way it's nothing for you. But when he feels away and reacts to basically your actions, it's his ego. And that's the second time she's done that. I feel like whenever things don't quite go, a lot of the things she interprets is just based on her own actions, her own feelings. She feels that way because he gave his candle to Mercedes, and that is precisely why she felt the need to state, oh, his ego wasn't playing, that he didn't give her a gift but he gave Mercedes a gift instead. It just doesn't make sense to me, because essentially they both did the same thing. So Blake bowed out, which is no surprise to anyone, because what was he gonna do? Stay there and connect with who? He literally has no other connection but Sue-Ann, so that doesn't surprise anyone. We got to find out before the women's lounge, Morgan goes out, speaks to Lyndon, essentially tells him she has this just mock of a connection with Tony. Okay, so basically Lyndon is out, essentially. So it's clear that there's literally only one connection Morgan has now, and that is Tony. And the same for Tony. So I think next week what's going to happen is they're going to be speaking with family members of the woman, I believe. So we'll see how that goes. But I think what happened, Jeffrey was saying something about Blake leaving is a cop-out. I feel like Jeffrey should worry about herself, considering next episode they're gonna be on her case about the fact that she has children and she has a chronic illness. So she better just worry about herself. She fantasizes everything. She makes everything sound like a fairy tale, which I think is problematic because life is not a fairy tale, child. So I don't know. As far as Morgan, I would break down too, because Lyndon literally gave her no reason to, get him sent home, or for her to choose. She gave him no reason to choose Tony over him, and that's what's difficult for her, because she knows that. And a lot of the time, the logical person to be with is A, but you choose B because you feel a stronger thing with B. Emotions are not very logical. And furthermore, he made a statement that what she wants, Morgan, he's not ready to give her: the children, the marriage, all of that. So it's like, as much as he does like her, it's not gonna lead into anything serious, at least not anytime soon. And I commend him for being honest with her, so it would make her decision final. Yes, he gave his opinion. Tony is controlling and he's manipulative, and she knows that. I think she's very aware of that, and him pointing it out makes her have to second guess her emotions and her feelings and stuff moving forward. But it's very right that he did, because sometimes you're blinded by lust, by deep emotions for people, but they may not be the right person for you. She pointed out 2 red flags: his anger and some other issue that he had. And I mean, if you guys can't work through that, it's best to just cut your losses and let things go, as difficult as that may seem. So these were the episodes I reviewed, I believe 8, 9, 10 and 11. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. It's lovely to be back. Sorry to have you guys waiting for so long, but I'm back and I'm prepared to be more consistent. So see you next time, and let me know what you think about Sue-Ann going home. Let me see, what do you think about Jeffrey, you guys? What opinions have you formulated about Jeffrey? Because she comes across as somebody that sees other people's issues and points it out, but she seldom sees hers. She seldom calls out herself. She seldom finds anything she does wrong. So let me know in the comment section what you think. Like, subscribe. See you guys next time. Bye bye.